The courtroom was already half full when he walked in. 17 years old. Cane in one hand, spiral notebook in the other. Dressed in a second-hand blazer, shoes one size too big. He didn't have a lawyer. He didn't have parents beside him. He had a presence. Quiet, deliberate presence. He found the defense table with the help of a court aide, tapped 3 times on the edge of the chair, then sat down. The judge glanced at the clerk. "We're ready?" The clerk nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Docket 57B, State versus Elijah Walker. Defendant present?" "Yes, sir." Representing himself. The judge looked over his glasses. "You're waiving your right to counsel?" Elijah nodded. "I am, Your Honor." A light chuckle came from the prosecution table. "Well," said the assistant district attorney, smirking, "I suppose I should try not to embarrass the poor kid too badly." A few people in the audience smiled. Elijah didn't. He reached into his notebook. "Permission to speak before opening statements, Your Honor." The judge raised an eyebrow. Briefly. Elijah stood slowly, carefully. "Just to clarify," he began, "the prosecution intends to paint me as reckless, suspicious, and evasive. But I would ask the court to also consider the following facts." He opened the notebook and read without hesitation. "That I've been blind since birth. That I graduated top of my class in civics. That I competed at the National Constitution Bowl last year and placed second nationwide. That I know every amendment in order, not because I had to memorize them, but because I needed to live them." The room went silent. Even the court reporter looked up. Elijah closed the notebook. "That's all." He sat down. The judge adjusted his glasses again. "Noted." The prosecutor cleared his throat. Opening statements then?" "Yes," the judge said. "You may proceed." But the energy in the room had already shifted. No one said it out loud. But they all felt it. This wasn't going to be the trial they expected. Because sometimes, the person they assume needs defending is the one who ends up defending the truth. Elijah Walker didn't see the world, but he understood it far better than most who did. Born premature, he lost his sight within the first month. His mother left before he could speak. His father was a name on a file. So Elijah grew up with his grandmother, Ruth, a retired librarian with worn hands and a voice like a storybook. She never let him feel small. "You don't need eyes to read the world," she used to say. "You just need to listen like you mean it." She taught him Braille before the school system did. She read court cases out loud at bedtime, like other kids got fairy tales. When Elijah was 9, he corrected a local police officer at a community meeting, quoted the Fourth Amendment word for word. The officer had laughed. Ruth hadn't place. She brought Elijah home that night, sat him down and said, "They'll always doubt what you can see, baby. So make sure they never doubt what you know." Elijah took that to heart. He wasn't athletic. He wasn't social. But he was precise. By age 13, he had a voice command system that could cross-reference case law. By 14, he won the statewide youth debate competition, beating cited competitors twice his age. His topic? Due process, the invisible line between order and oppression. By 15, he'd written an open letter to the local school board arguing against ableist infrastructure. It was published in 3 newspapers. But Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't want attention. He wanted consistency. "I don't want praise," he told Ruth one night. "I want logic. I want fairness that doesn't depend on pity." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then you're not chasing justice," she said. "You're becoming it." He studied criminal procedure for fun, listened to audio versions of Supreme Court decisions, memorized dissents. And whenever someone asked him what he wanted to be, he'd smile. "I want to write the laws that make people uncomfortable because they finally apply to everyone." But beneath all that brilliance was still a kid. Still someone who liked the sound of rain on the window. Still someone who held Ruth's arm a little tighter when they crossed busy streets. Still someone who, in a moment of real fear, might be mistaken, might be mislabeled, might be silenced. That moment came on a Thursday. Late spring, the air thick with pollen and misunderstanding. A quick trip to a corner store. A bump, a spilled box. A voice yelling, he was reaching for something. A siren. And suddenly, Elijah Walker was in handcuffs. He tried to explain, tried to say his cane had fallen, that he bent to find it, but the officer said, that's what they all say. Ruth arrived an hour later heartbroken. Tried to speak for him. But the system doesn't listen well when it thinks it already knows the story. They set a court date. Said he was lucky to be charged with misdemeanor theft and not something worse. Elijah didn't cry. He didn't rage. He asked for access to the library's court records. And when the legal aid paperwork got delayed due to a name discrepancy, he didn't wait. He told Ruth, I'll go alone. You sure? She asked. He touched the notebook on his lap. They think I'm weak, he said. But they forgot I've been learning how to speak in rooms that never planned to hear me. It was supposed to be a simple errand. Ruth had asked Elijah to go pick up almond milk and her arthritis prescription. He liked that store. Small, quiet. The cashier always recognized him. The aisles were familiar. He moved slow but confident, counting steps, brushing shelves with his left fingertips, cane tapping lightly. He grabbed the items, paid. The prescription wasn't ready yet, so he waited near the front. That's when the trouble started. A man bumped into him near the cold drinks. Elijah stumbled. His cane fell. He bent to find it, both hands reaching across the floor. In that moment, someone behind him gasped. Hey, what are you doing? A woman shouted. He's reaching for something. A store employee ran over. Elijah stood upright, confused. What's going on? Don't move, the man barked. Sir, I'm just trying to. Put your hands up. Elijah hesitated. I can't see you. Don't play games. A minute later, a police officer entered. Another customer pointed. That's him. He was messing with the fridge section. Might have taken something. I paid, Elijah said. You can check. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Please, Elijah said. This is a misunderstanding. But they didn't listen. They patted him down. Found nothing. Still cuffed him. Said it was for safety. Took him outside. Ruth arrived in her old station wagon, tears already forming. This is my grandson, she said. He's blind. He didn't do anything. The officer replied flatly, Tell it to the judge. At the precinct, the report read, Individual appeared evasive, matched suspect description, suspicious behavior, possible attempted theft. There were no security tapes from that corner. The cameras had been out for weeks. But the customer's word was enough. It looked like he was hiding something. That was the evidence. Not an object. Not a missing item. Just an impression. The arraignment was scheduled fast. The public defender application stalled. Elijah's form was signed by Ruth, but her name didn't match the legal guardian record the court had from years ago. Bureaucracy froze. You can wait, they said, or represent yourself. Elijah asked, How long will it take to fix the paperwork? Could be weeks. And the court date? 2 days. Ruth cried that night. Elijah didn't. He just said, Give me my notes. You can't go in there alone, Ruth whispered. I've always been alone in rooms like that, Elijah said. At least this time. They'll have to listen. And so he prepared. Not to prove his innocence, but to prove that his existence didn't have to come with an apology. He didn't ask the system for mercy. He asked it to live up to its own rules. And when he walked into that courtroom, no one expected what would happen next. The prosecutor rose from his seat like he was preparing for theater. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, he began. Today, you'll hear a very eloquent young man speak. He nodded toward Elijah with a smirk. But don't let the speeches distract you from the facts. This is a simple case. A suspicious individual caught acting evasively in a commercial establishment. He paced in front of the jury box. No ID, no guardian present, no visual confirmation of payment. He refused to comply. The officer followed protocol. This isn't about his condition. It's about his conduct. Elijah sat still, one hand on the table, the other resting lightly on the edge of his notebook. When the prosecutor sat down, Elijah stood. The judge nodded. "You may respond." Elijah's voice was low but clear. "Your Honor, opposing counsel used the word evasive 3 times. But let me clarify what that looked like. A teenager standing still, holding a cane, asking where the fridge aisle was, then bending to retrieve that cane when it fell. He paused. I wasn't evading. I was navigating." He turned toward the jury, though he could not see them. The officer claimed I was uncooperative. But is it uncooperative to ask why I'm being detained? Is it uncooperative to remind someone I cannot see their hand gestures? Or is it just uncomfortable to have someone like me ask questions the system doesn't want to answer? The courtroom was still. He opened his notebook. The prosecution also said, and I quote, "There was no visual confirmation of payment." Respectfully, how would I visually confirm anything? A soft murmur in the gallery. The judge raised a hand. Silence returned. Elijah continued, "I have a receipt. I gave it to the officer. I named the items. I listed the total. None of that made it into the report." He turned toward the bench. "Your Honor, the ADA said this isn't about my condition, but I respectfully argue it absolutely is. Because my condition isn't the problem. Their assumption about it is. The Americans with Disabilities Act was written so that people like me wouldn't be handled based on guesswork, fear, or ignorance. And yet here I stand, charged for moving differently." The prosecutor scoffed audibly. "With all due respect," he muttered, "this isn't a political debate." Elijah turned slightly. "No, sir, it's not. It's a personal one." He opened a second page. In Terry v. Ohio, the court ruled that an officer may stop and frisk if there is reasonable suspicion. But that suspicion must be based on articulable facts, not discomfort, not unfamiliarity, not fear of blindness. I was cooperative, I answered calmly. I stood still until someone asked me to kneel. And I'm here now, not to win, but to remind this courtroom that justice must be accessible, not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally, legally. He folded his notes. I rest for now, but I ask this court to do what the arresting officer didn't. See me. He sat down. The judge leaned forward slowly. Aid, any rebuttal? The prosecutor fumbled with his pen. We'd like to call the witness who reported the incident. The judge nodded. Proceed. But as the witness entered, a new tension filled the air. Because Elijah already knew, the truth was no longer hiding. It was about to walk itself onto the stand. The courtroom recessed for 30 minutes. The prosecutor needed time to review statements. But really, he needed time to recover from the blow of being out-reasoned by a kid, a blind one. Elijah sat quietly, notebook open, fingers tapping in a rhythm only he understood. Ruth sat behind him, clutching the edges of her purse. A few audience members leaned closer, now watching Elijah not like a spectacle, but like a scholar. When the court resumed, the prosecutor adjusted his tie twice before standing. Your Honor, he said, we'd like to call a witness, the store employee who interacted with the defendant prior to police arrival. A young man took the stand, early 20s, nervous. State your name. Trevor Hayes. Mr. Hayes, what did you observe that day? The kid was at the counter. He paid. Then he stood near the drink coolers for a while. Then he dropped something, I think, and there was a customer who got startled. Did you see the defendant take anything? Number, I didn't see anything missing. But you believe the situation could have escalated? I mean, yeah. There was yelling. I didn't know what was going on. Elijah rose. Mr. Hayes, may I ask you a few questions? Yeah. When I dropped something, what did I say? You said, excuse me, I lost my cane. Did I reach into my bag? Number? Did I move toward the exit? Number? Did I speak aggressively? Number? So what made people panic? Hayes hesitated. Someone yelled. It escalated fast. Do you recall who yelled? A woman, older, floral blouse, I think. Elijah tapped his notes. The same woman who made the initial 911 call. He turned slightly toward the judge. Your Honor, may I submit a public record? Proceed. Elijah handed a document to the court aide. This is the transcription of the 911 call, which I obtained legally through FOIA request. The caller, Miss Nancy Wilcox, claims, there's a young man acting weird, might be hiding something. He's dressed all dark. He doesn't make eye contact. Might be on something. Elijah took a breath. She said, I don't make eye contact. I'm blind. That's not suspicion. That's anatomy. Gasps rippled through the court. He continued, now, who is Miss Wilcox? Retired school teacher. Lives 3 blocks from the store. Volunteer at a neighborhood watch. She's also the person who, 4 months ago, filed a formal complaint to City Council objecting to the installation of new accessibility ramps in her area. The courtroom hushed. Her reason? Elijah read from the complaint. Too many modifications for too few people. This is still a country for the able and the ready. He folded the paper. Bias isn't always a slur, Your Honor. Sometimes it's a sigh. A phone call. A quiet refusal to see someone who's different. The prosecutor objected. Relevance. I'm establishing pattern, Elijah replied. Her perception shaped the police response. Her personal bias escalated my reality. Sustained, the judge said, but his tone had softened. Elijah turned to face forward. We talk about justice like it's a scale. But today, it was a voice. And that voice never asked me a question. It just called the cops. He turned to the gallery. What would have happened if I had resisted? If I'd panicked? If I didn't know the laws that were supposed to protect me? He placed both hands flat on the defense table. Then this trial would not be about misunderstanding. It would be about survival. And someone like me would have been another silent file. The prosecutor looked down. The judge exhaled. Ruth wiped her eyes. And then, the back door creaked open. A woman walked in floral blouse, tight lips. Nancy Wilcox. She looked at Elijah. Then at the judge. Your Honor, she said softly, may I speak? The room froze. You're not under subpoena, the judge said. I know. I need to say something. He nodded once. She stepped forward, trembling. I called the police that day because I was afraid. But the truth is, I didn't see a threat. I saw something I didn't understand, and I mistook it for danger. She looked at Elijah. I was wrong. She turned back to the judge. And whatever happens, I want the record to show he didn't fail society. We failed him. The courtroom didn't erupt. It settled into something still, like a place where something important had just happened. But no one knew what to say. Nancy Wilcox sat down, quietly. The prosecutor shifted in his chair. The man who once smirked when Elijah chose to represent himself now avoided eye contact. Your Honor, he said after a long silence, the state has no further witnesses. The judge turned to Elijah. Would you like to make a closing statement? Elijah stood. He didn't unfold his notes. He didn't lift his chin dramatically. He just stood. I never wanted to be here, he began. Not in this courtroom. Not on this side of the law. Not trying to convince a room that I'm human. He paused. But maybe I was supposed to be. Because if someone like me quiet careful, legally literate can be mistaken for a threat, then what happens to the ones who aren't so prepared? What happens to the ones who panic? Or run? Or cry out instead of quoting the Constitution? His voice didn't rise. It softened. Justice should not be a prize for performance. It should be a promise. Even when we're scared. Even when we don't fit the description. Elijah turned slightly toward the prosecution table. To the state, I don't hate you. I just want you to be better at your job. The prosecutor dropped his gaze. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Walker, do you know what impresses me most about you? No, sir. It's not your memory or your case law. It's that you came in here not to win, but to teach. He turned to the room, and I think we all just learned something. He looked back to Elijah. Verdict to be announced after recess. Court stands adjourned. The gavel came down. People stood. Some clapped brief, restrained. The prosecutor approached Elijah at the defense table. Mr. Walker. Elijah tilted his head. Yes, sir? The man hesitated, then reached into his briefcase, pulled out a business card. This is the name of a mentor of mine. Runs a nonprofit for legal education. I think they'd want to hear you speak someday. Elijah didn't smile. He just reached out, accepted the card, and said, I plan to make them listen. Ruth walked up, silent tears still drying. Elijah reached for her hand. They saw me, he whispered. No, she replied. You made them see themselves. And in that moment, even the man who tried to convict him knew that justice hadn't just arrived. It had grown up in front of them. The verdict came the next morning. Not guilty on all counts. Elijah didn't cheer. He didn't break down. He simply nodded. Then turned to Ruth and whispered, Now I can finally go back to reading. That afternoon, the judge sent a private message to Ruth. Your grandson reminded me why I took this bench in the first place. Elijah's story spread first locally, then nationally. Law students quoted his closing remarks. Professors used his hearing transcript in classroom debate. But Elijah stayed home, quiet, uninterested in headlines. Until one day, he agreed to speak at a middle school. The auditorium was packed. 6th, 7th, and 8th graders half whispering, half skeptical. Elijah walked to the front slowly. No fanfare. Just a cane, a voice, and a truth heavier than most people could carry. Some of you think I'm here to tell you how brave I am, he said. I'm not. I'm here to tell you how prepared I had to be. Just to be believed. The room quieted. I wasn't brave when they cuffed me, he continued. I was scared. I wasn't confident when I stood in court. I was tired. But I'd spent my whole life studying how systems work, because I knew one day a system might forget who I was. So I had to remember for both of us. One student raised her hand. Do you want to be a lawyer? Elijah paused. No, he said. I want to write laws that never ask people like me to beg for their dignity. The crowd sat still, no clapping, just breath held. Another student asked, What would you tell someone who's scared to speak up? Elijah smiled. Speak anyway, he said. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one's listening. Yet, say it anyway. The principal stood to thank him. Elijah shook his head. No need, he said. Just give every kid in this room access to a copy of the Constitution. In Braille. Or audio. Or plain English. Because the law isn't just for lawyers. It's for the next person stopped without reason, who doesn't have a courtroom full of eyes to protect them. As he left the stage, a teacher in the audience whispered, That boy doesn't want justice. He reminds us what it's supposed to look like. And Ruth? She placed Elijah's worn notebook on a shelf at home, right next to a dusty copy of the U.S. Constitution, and said quietly, One taught him the rules. The other taught him how to rewrite them. Elijah didn't win because he was loud. He didn't win because he was special. He won because he was prepared. In a world that was never prepared to believe someone like him. He didn't ask for pity. He didn't beg for justice. He reminded the law how it was meant to be applied. This wasn't a story about triumph in the courtroom. It was about what happens when someone refuses to shrink, even when the system tells them they should. If this story made you stop, even for a single breath, then share it. Share it for the students who read with fingers, not eyes. For the ones who speak logic before they're taken seriously. And for the next Elijah, who won't have to prove his worth just to be protected. At Hidden Justice, we don't just tell stories. We uncover the truths that were almost overlooked, and the people who made silence impossible. If you believe those voices matter, subscribe. Not for numbers, not for trends, but so that stories like Elijah's don't stay in the courtroom, they reach the classrooms. So if you're still listening, maybe it's because part of you knows justice should never have to raise its hand to be called on.